a think tank in Westminster Policy Exchange, is calling on the government to take a stronger stance to prevent dress codes being imposed upon Muslim women. Dr. Paul Stott is the head of security and extremism at Policy Exchange. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Peter.
From what I read of what you've said, there are a certain proportion of Muslim women who, of course, may wish to wear the hijab or niqab to publicly demonstrate their Muslim identity, and there's nothing wrong with that, in my view. But there are, in terms of the debate on this, are a number of extremists who have been dominating the debate. Tell us what your research has found.
Well, this really is a question about genuine freedom of choice, the right to do something and the right not to do something. And things are beginning to change, particularly in the Muslim majority world. We've seen the women's movement in Iran really over recent years, but in particular in the last 12 months, completely reject forced hijab, the forced veil in Iran. Opinion poll data across the Middle East shows a sort of decline in religiosity. And we haven't really caught up with this in the UK, or rather we have, I think, perhaps, but the debates really are being skewed by a sort of fear of what's referred to as Islamophobia, and that really skewing debate, first of all about events in Iran, but also perhaps about events closer to home as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because, as you say, I mean, those events in Iran, showing that the Islamic veil may be used as an instrument of oppression of women. I mean, presumably there'll be a lot of people listening to this from the Muslim community who will say, Paul, butt out. We know what we're doing. We're happy to wear whatever we want. And maybe this is a bit patronising. What would you say to that criticism, Paul?
Well, one of the report's authors, Professor Ilham Maniz, a Muslim woman of Yemeni extraction colleague, who we've worked with on the report, and she, in effect, doesn't necessarily distance herself from those positions, but the argument is we have to have a debate, we have to have a discussion.
Is it possible to have a reasonable discussion about this without just someone shouting at you and saying you're an Islamophobe?
Well, that's one of the difficulties, isn't it? When there's been an attempt to have these debates, they get shut down. If you remember the row over Boris Johnson's article about the burqa a few years ago, yes, his language was clumsy, this, that, and the other, but he actually...
that's pretty offensive to a lot of people, the sentiments and some... And I mean, I personally didn't find it offensive, but a lot of people did.
Within the article, Peter, when people read the full article, he actually argued against the type of prescriptions that you have in some European countries to ban the burqa, that wasn't how we approach things. And I think Boris Johnson was correct, but unfortunately, all this emotion, all these rows, all these lobby groups piled onto it and took the debate in another direction. And we can't keep doing that. We can't keep making these mistakes. The world is clearly changing. Attitudes in the Middle East are changing, and the UK can't be left behind on that. I mean, we've recently seen this bizarre development in the West Midlands of a hijab sculpture that's, I think, going up in Smethwick, and the details of that were announced in the week of the anniversary of the death of Masha Amini, one of the women protests in Iran. Killed by the Iranian religious police, and on the anniversary of that, we're putting up sculptures in the UK to what she saw as a symbol of oppression. It's bizarre.
So what's the solution here, do you think?
Well, there's a solution for all of us to speak our minds openly, to debate, to debate pleasantly, and to be a little bit kinder to one another in the public sphere, so everybody gets to speak. But there's also a solution here for government. One of Policy Exchange's recommendations is the government should reject the Islamophobia definition, which it's actually rejected back in 2019 because it would restrict debate on these types of issues. But what we've seen in the years since is local authorities, various political groups adopt that definition. So you almost get it by stealth. And it isn't clear that that's helping political debate. It isn't clear that it's helping in terms of freedom of choice. And the government must hold its position. But also the government needs to ensure that there's clear guidance at the local level in the National Health Service. There's no national guidance on religious clothing. And similarly in education, where the guidance needs to be tightened tightened as well, so schools aren't saying that the hijab is compulsory for their pupils.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Paul Stott there, who's Head of Security and Extremism at Policy Exchange. They have a new report out there